¿Qué es la que hay? Welcome to Tony West DIY. My name is West. This is episode 4 for the Borg Warner EFR series, and we're almost done. On today's episode, we talk about spark plugs, finish installing the oil catch can, and we talk about heat management. I mentioned some of the benefits of why it's important, especially in rotary engines. So don't go anywhere and enjoy the video. ¿Qué es la que hay? Welcome back to Tony West DIY. My name is West. And you guys heard the intro. These are all the parts that we're gonna work today. Some heat management, some fittings, spark plugs, and AN lines. Before we start, Eros FD3S asked me a question in my last video. By the way, you know the drill. If you haven't seen the last video, you can click on this card right here, or I will post the links below. So he asked me a question. He wanted to see more in detail where I routed the line for the wastegates, and this is the temporary one. I'm trying to identify an area that is tucked away, but I also want to finish the car. So this is where I routed getting out of the fender. You can see just go up and it goes all the way into that area, and then just go underneath the steering wheel and ends on the wastegates. Since this is a right-hand drive, there's limited space below the turbo because of the steering column. I'm assuming if it's a left-hand drive, you'll still have a little bit more space down there. But to be honest, I also thought to run it through the inner part of the intake manifold where the fuel rail is, and then going out on the other side and then go down. I'm still thinking about it. If you have a better way, hit me up and comment below. I also want to show him. It's basically to a T, and then it goes to the wastegates. Is make sure you clamp all these connectors. You can see down there and in the T. It seems tight right now, but whenever you're tuning the car, you know how expensive can get. And the first common issues when you're tuning the car is the vacuum lines just popping out. And then try to identify where the issue is. You will save time and money if you sit tight and make sure that those vacuum lines stay where they're supposed to be. Also, the recirculating valve, this is supposed to see boost and vacuum. So this one just go to the intake manifold, which I'm gonna show you later where I'm gonna put it. The top water line, this is what I did. I got a fitting, and then I got a 180-degree hose. And the heater core, I might change this silicone line. Elliot of Tourbillon told me, you know, doesn't look right. It looks like there's a lot of pressure there, and I agree. I might get the stock one, might cut it and then modify it. I appreciate all the people that have been commenting, sharing, liking the videos. I really do. It's been increasing reactions, and believe it or not, you're supporting the channel. So I really appreciate all of you guys. And without any further ado, let's get started. And today's video, we're gonna start it with the downpipe. I want to thank Tyler from Ken's Automotive and Transmission. I was looking for somebody locally to weld the flange for the turbo and remove the marmon flash.
What?
And remove the marmon flash.
What did you say?
That this downpipe came with. He just tagged it in place. He told me to install it and see if everything looks okay, and then he will weld the rest. right, and let's talk about spark plugs. So these are the common ones for the rotary engines. You see the style in the bottom, and usually they come with the NGKs BUR9 or 7. It even tells you trailing and leading. You don't know what trailing and leading is, you can watch my first video. I explain a little bit more about it. And the 9 and 7 is just the heat range. The lower the number, the hotter is the spark. The higher the number, the colder is. That sounds cool, West, but what does that mean? So the colder the spark plug, the best ability it has to transfer the heat in the spark. If you're running your car stock, or I'm assuming up to 300 horsepower, these spark plugs are good enough. However, the higher the horsepower or more boost you're pushing, the colder spark plug you need to prevent pre-ignition. Especially in rotary engines, don't like detonation at all.
Oh, they're very reliable. It's very reliable. They will break down frequently and cost a lot of money to fix.
There are different ranges from 7, 9, 10, 11. However, the colder the spark plug, the more probability it has to foul, especially if you're running your car in colder areas. I'm gonna go with NGK Iridium's 9, and I'm just gonna use 9 on all of them. I heard good things about these spark plugs. However, the only issue is that you will need a thin wall socket, just because how short this area is comparing with these ones. And if you can see in the housing has a top lid that will prevent the socket to go in. I'm gonna post the link below where you can find it. For these ones, as you can see, these ones are like more of like a normal spark plug type. And I have to double check the gap, because when I received this in the package, some of them were out and the gap might be closer. I read in different forums that the ideal gap for this one is 0.030. If not, the idle will be rough. Alright guys, let's talk about heat management and why it's so important. Here I have a couple of products that I'm gonna use on my car. You can see the turbo shield, sun wrap, and other ones that it basically help minimize the temperatures in the engine bay, or it protects different components from the heat. So let's talk about why it's so important, especially on rotary engines. As you know, rotary engines run really hot, and that's one of the flaws of the design. The reason why they run hot is because at least one of the phases is doing combustion constantly, versus a piston engine. Let me talk specifically a 4-cylinder. While 2 pistons are getting cold air, 2 pistons are doing combustion. In rotary engines, while one rotor is doing the combustion process, the other rotor is preparing to do it as well. So it creates constant heat, especially in the bottom of the engine. Check the design of the rotary engine. The intake ports are on the same side where the exhaust is. And if you see this turbo manifold and where the turbo is really close to the intake. This car has a sensor on the bottom of the intake manifold that measures the air temperature. So while the computer is thinking that it's a certain temperature, the reality is that it's not. Especially when people move that sensor and they put it in the elbow. You can see these 2 ports go to rotor number 1 and then rotor number 2. So technically, this rotor would run more hotter or lean than the rear one. That's why I mentioned on my first video where I explained about the importance of the EGT bonds in the turbo manifold, because that way you can capture more data on how each rotor is behaving, and you can just fuel to get more horsepower reliable. The cooler the air that goes into the rotors, the more dense it is, more horsepower. So having a turbo shield here and then a wrap and then some covers, it will make the heat stay where it's supposed to be instead of spreading in the whole engine bay. Another benefit is that keeping the heat in the turbo, it will make the turbo spool faster. So you can see a gain of couple horsepower in the mid-range. And lastly, it protects other components, especially sensors, cables that have to pass next to it, or any wire. I'm pretty sure you've seen the header wraps, and these basically do the same. Some of these header wrap, before installing, you have to let it soak in water. Some of them, you don't need to do that. One of the cons about that is just since they retain water, you can see I'm showing you here the downpipe that I had. So retaining water in the wraps can cause rust in the downpipe. They also can absorb oil, and if you realize that you have an oil leak, if it gets too hot, it can burn that oil and cause a fire. Another con that they have is they get brittle the older they get. So basically you have to monitor them and then replace them. Make sure when you're touching this thing, you cover your skin because you're gonna be itchy as hell. These ones I bought it from Design Engineering as well. By the way, they're not sponsoring me. I just went to their website to see what they had. And I'm just gonna try to improvise and create a cover for the lower intake manifold and see what happens. It will be basically covering the lower intake manifold. A lot of people utilize the gold tape, but to be honest, I really don't like how that looks in the engine bay. What? Especially if it's not well installed and it's all wrinkled and shit. So we'll see how that looks. And looking at the space and room that I have in the header right now, wish me luck wrapping that thing.
Take it over. I'm really on this. Understand for elevating, man. I do it now. I really gotta make it like I don't care what they be really saying. So I'm coming through and I just gotta slay it. I'm a monster. I'm a genius, man. I'm working so hard. So I don't really care what I say right now. I rise to the top. Whoa, I rise to the top. You should know. Yeah, I ain't gonna give up. Oh no. 'Cause I'm a monster, and you know that I came to kill it. So here we go.
Alright, I tried to show you guys how I wrap the header. By the way, try to do it when it's out. Don't even try to do it when it's inside the car because it's a pain in the freaking ass. But the GoPro didn't get it right. It was too dark. Basically, just real quick, you have to prime it first. Priming is just going around and test how many loops you need before you cut the actual piece. You want to try to do it in just one try. So I basically wrap one of the runners first and then wrap the second one. But before you cut, make sure you prime. You go around and try to identify how many loops you need. Also, when you start wrapping, try to overlap each loop at least a 1/4 inch. And then before you start, you see the difference between this corner and this one. I don't know if you guys can see it, but this one goes to the collector always. And then when you start, you want to hold it, like fold it in not in half, but in an angle like that, and then you start wrapping it. What I did, because of the room that I had, I wrapped the first loop and then I put a zip tie, and then I start going around. And once I was done with the last part, I put the actual metal zip tie, or however you call it, to hold the bottom part in place. And then I cut it, the zip tie, the plastic one, and then I put the metal ones. Like always, you can contact me in my social media account, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at TonyWestDIY, or by Gmail at TonyWestDIY@gmail.com. Guys, we're getting close to finish the car. I really appreciate all of you guys that watched the whole series and watched this video until now. Believe it or not, that support the channel a lot. So thank you, stay safe, until the next one. Let's do something before I finish the video. Since I have to prime the turbo, let's try to do that now. Remove the fuel pump relay. First time starting the car after the Borg Warner installation.